Five, four, three, two. Woo! Hey everybody! Hey everybody! I know you all gonna come on over. Come on over, come on over, come on over. We are here on the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It is a joy to be with you. And let me wish my baby brother, Congressman Jonathan Jackson, a happy birthday. I love you so much. He's almost in the club. That's right, getting old. And that's all right. I love it. I love it. I love it. My father told me if you don't like birthdays, try missing one. Hey, everybody, let's talk about where we go from here. Dr. King wrote a book almost 60 years ago. Where do we go from here? Chaos or community? And we've got a culture. Vivek Ramaswamy talked about it. When we've been talking about the H-1B visas. And he said, it's not that we don't have good students in the United States. The fact is you have some other people who work a little harder, who work a little smarter because of the culture. I thought that was interesting because, I know Dr. Ronald McNair, the astronaut on the Challenger mission, who was killed in 1986. He came out of North Carolina A&T, and they brought him on as an at-risk student. And he came out with the highest honors and went to MIT. You've got that kind of talent all over the country, but they're being gone past so that the oligarchs can bring in people who are desperate, people who will be compliant. There's a lot that's going on the right and the left. But in the meantime, in the middle, we've got our morality. Where are we? And what are we fighting for? This young man, I have to tell you, I've been so impressed with him. We were, you would hear people discuss Tulsa, kind of, sort of. But then there was someone who decided to stand outside of a government building by himself, holding a sign, demanding justice for Tulsa, for the survivors, and demanding that the nation shine a spotlight on a community that was the first community in America to be bombed by American bombs. That had never happened before. But the white citizens in that community hired our military planes, and they were flown, and the bombs were dropped on this prosperous black community. We did it in Rosewood. We did it in Greenwood. We did it in Lake Lanier. We've done it all over the country. So when people say that black people have not been striving, that is not true. Every time we have gotten into a certain space of prosperity, bombs, figuratively and literally, have been dropped on us. And it's happened to the indigenous community as well. We've seen that. And this young man stood 10 toes down, and eventually one person, two person, then a community came and stood with him. And they said, we do need to talk about Tulsa. And so we all went to Tulsa just a few years ago and compel the president to come to Tulsa, to look at Tulsa. And we think of Bishop Carlton Pearson, who was, in Oklahoma, and sending him so much love. May he rest in peace and power. But this all was driven by Reverend Dr. Robert Allen Turner. I'm so glad that he is with us. He is with the Empowerment Temple. He's no longer in Tulsa. I'm glad that he's moved a little bit closer. He went on to take over Jamal Bryant's pastorate. And see, this is one of these. I love the AME church because it was a church born out of protest. They said, I'm not going to sit. I'm not going to. Now, you all can have your segregation all day long, but when it comes to God's house, we're not going to have that. So we thank God for this church. And we thank God for Reverend Dr. Robert Turner and all that he has done. Indeed, he's someone for whom my father and my mother and my family have so much respect and admiration. I want you to get his book. It is really, and I just ordered it last night, the Creating a Culture of Repair. Because we do need to be revived. And I say that because now that we're in this Trump era, everybody's scared, even though we've had so much that's happening right now before we even get to Trump. You got the H-1B visa program that's here right now. You got the tent partnership for refugees. You get the so-called highly skilled workers, the people, let's say the workers with degrees at the top. That's H-1B. Then the workers without degrees at the bottom. They're all being brought in. Both sets of these workers are being brought in here to work for cheap. And they're compliant, they're scared. And that is really what oligarchs want. Slave masters never retire, my father said. And so now they were slave masters back in the day. Now they're the oligarchs because the culture's changed. You know, we don't want to just make a profit. We want profit maximization, which means the worker gets squeezed. But then we look in our communities and we are struggling. We're moving away from marriage. We're moving away from so many of our children are not being born with two parents in the home. It's just, yeah, I'm going there today, everybody. And we're not pushing back to protest for our rights. So I bring to you Reverend Dr. Robert Turner, because I'm really turning this over to you because we really, really need you today. And D. Ray Jones said, right. That's right. Because we need to have some real talk, and we need a talking to. And I'm so glad that you're with us. And I'm glad that you're at the Empowerment Temple. I can't wait to be with you. It's going to be in the next few weeks. I can't wait to get there.
Me too.
In Baltimore, Maryland. What a great church. What a great city full of history. And you tell me, because we met you in Tulsa, what is that, 5 years ago now?
2021.
2021. That was it's 4 years ago. Come this spring. So tell me, what were you doing? Explain to people what you were doing in Tulsa, because when we looked up and saw what you had been doing, my father said, "Oh no, we got to go down here," because you invited him.
I did.
You were the one who said, "No, I know you all are having all of these celebrations, but you wanted Reverend Jackson to be there."
That's
and,
right.
The interesting thing about the AME church is that they move you all around. That's interesting. And you were put in Tulsa. When you were placed in Tulsa, what did you see? What made you go and start protesting?
Yeah, well, I first of all, I am so delighted and honored to be on your show and to be in your midst, even though virtually you give an aura of generosity and spirit and love, and I'm a fan, always have been. So thank you for having me on the show, and happy birthday to Representative Jonathan Jackson, great friend and brother of mine as well. I went to Tulsa as an AME pastor. We get assigned churches. But before I went, like the day I got the call, I had prayed to God. I was praying to God on my knees, and I said, Lord, I feel like you want me to go somewhere and do something. And whatever you want me to do, wherever you want me to go, I just want you to know my answer is yes. Because prior to typically when God wanted me to do some things, I would resist, to be quite honest. Like I didn't even want to go into ministry, to be completely honest.
Really?
I had I was going to law school. I was in law school, matter of fact, at the University of Alabama. I was going to, pursue a career in law and possibly pursue political office, and all that jazz. But when God called me, I left and left the country too. Went to Kenya on a mission trip, and God just opened my eyes to some miraculous things that I've never forgotten. So I typically fight, right? And so this time I said, Lord, I'm not going to fight. I'm going to say yes to whatever it is, wherever you want me to go. And I did. I said yes. And as soon as I ended my prayer in Jesus' name, I said, in Jesus' name I pray, amen. I get off my knees to get my cell phone to put it on the charger for the evening. But before I put it on the charger, I wanted to see what time it was, because I like to track how many hours of sleep I get. I look at my phone for the time, but I also noticed I had a text message, and the text message came from a bishop and said, brother, I have an opportunity for you in my district. Will you come? Santita, I had just told God yes. And not even 2 seconds later, I get the question for my answer. And so without knowing where I was going, because he didn't tell me, he said he had an opportunity for me. So I replied back, yes. I didn't know I was going to Tulsa until I didn't know I was, so I commit to go, left my job in Alabama and the church that I was pastoring, told my bishop I need a letter of transfer. I go to this meeting not knowing where I'm going. Can you imagine quitting a job, leaving a place where your children are going to nice schools? You're in a suburb of Alabama, Birmingham, and I go to this meeting not knowing where I'm going, and I find out I'm going to this church called Vernon. And at the time, nobody knew what Vernon was and the history behind it. And Tulsa was like, why are you going to? I never met a black person from Oklahoma, let alone Tulsa, in my life. And so I'm like, they got black folks over here. And so I go to the church and I see it in need of great repair in a community that people forgot the church even existed, honestly. But I started to read the history of the city and the history of the church. And I realized I knew about the massacre, but I did not know the church's role in the massacre and the address of the church being on Greenwood Avenue, being so central. So that motivated me, and I felt God moved me to take action, whereas everybody else had forgotten about it pretty much. To take action from a faith perspective, right? No, there was no faith speaking on that. Black from the black church. Now, white folks were really talking about it in years prior, and we had activists such as City Councilman Vanessa Hall Harper who was doing some things on it, but no one from like the faith community per se. And I was led to go out every week to City Hall and stand at the door and demand that the city recognize what they did, not as a riot, but as a massacre, really attempted genocide, and to repair from that. And to recognize what they did, remember what they did, and repair from that. And so I did that for 3 years. 3 years, and thanks be to God, we have a mass grave excavation committee. Bodies have literally been taken out of the ground that were killed during the massacre. They just dumped our bodies in mass graves, and also now they have reparations commission for that effort to bring about repair. Also, as the pastor of Vernon, started the lawsuit that unfortunately ended recently unsuccessfully. But Vernon was, I found the lawyer, and Vernon was the first church that was a plaintiff on that. And terrible things happened as far as how the case turned out. But that was the part of the fight that I led in Tulsa. And I mean, and I had my life threatened, character threatened, everything threatened while I was there. And I didn't have to do any of it, right? I went there to pastor a church, but God led me to pastor a community. And to God be the praise.
Well, amen to that. I mean, and when we got there, when you had, yeah, because you were very intentional about having, I mean, because you put so much focus on Tulsa that it became a local story, it became a regional story, and then it became a national story.
That's right.
Then it became a national call that was so compelling that the first president in the history of the country actually came down there to acknowledge the massacre.
That's right. That's right.
And we had Bishop Carlton Pearson. You know, he said
your dad came. You came.
Well, no, he didn't just come. He was invited.
Yes, I had to. It could not have become. I mean, and people were inviting other folks, but I'm a fan and student of our struggle and our people. And in my humble opinion, nobody alive today has done more for Black people than Reverend Jesse Jackson. It's just not, it's without question. And so to bring the story to an international level, I knew my little lane that I did, that God allowed me to do, it was, more or less John the Baptist, preparing the way. But I needed, and I wanted your dad to come and speak. And when I tell you to start off on that street of where the city hall is by myself, with folks calling me crazy and everything. But I didn't care about when CNN came. I didn't care about when CBS came. I didn't care about when the cameras came. When I saw Reverend Jesse Jackson standing next to me and speaking on that same corner, that sent chills down my spine. And it was truly a momentous time. And I think it was a step. It was not just a step, it was a leap forward for the movement for Tulsa and for reparations for all our people, to have a voice such as Reverend Jesse Jackson come.
Well, that was bringing the movement in, because you're doing something, and I know my father just sees you as one of his sons in the ministry.
Amen.
Because, well, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, he was the son of one of the most prominent Black ministers in the country. I mean, people don't realize Ebenezer's prominence. They had thousands of members in the 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
Dr. King was really part of the Black elite, if you will.
That's right.
Completely left behind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so his father was very prominent in the National Baptist Convention. And when Dr. King became active in the civil rights movement, and this is a PhD, he's at the top with no debt. His parents wrote the check, sent him to school because they could do that. Well, he was basically thrown out of the National Baptist Convention. I mean, and really the establishment Black church, whatever the denominations, because we really are one church.
Yeah, that's right.
They shunned him. And so you're taking the risk. You will be standing outside of City Hall by yourself. And I will tell you, everybody, rain, sleet, snow, and hail, he did this every day.
Thanks.
And so people did look at him like he was just a little crazy. But I understand that crazy because my father's that kind of crazy. But why is it important, which leads me to this, why is it important for the church to take that stance? I mean, because you said, you had seen people in elective office, one or two who were talking about it, but you didn't see the church taking a definitive stance.
I think it's important for the church to take a stand on issues of morality that extend beyond the walls of the church. It's one thing to condemn sins of individuals, and we do that quite well. But it's an entirely different thing to condemn sins of institutions. And we, in this country, we have stated, Citizens versus United, that institutions, corporations are people. I'll never forget that when Mitt Romney was running for president. That was the reigning idea. But also biblically, institutions, nations will be judged. We believe that, and when we read the book of Revelations, that's not an individual judgment. That's an institutional judgment of cities, principalities. And so I think it is important for the church to speak to not just individual sin, but to institutional sin. And to, as we do with individuals, we meet them where they are. It is important for us to meet the institutions where they are. And because they won't come to us, in large part, we have to go to them. And that has been an approach that I have had, and not something I even created. I mean, borrowing from people such as your dad and Dr. King, literally going to the halls and walls and buildings of power to make your request known. And it's something that's been international. Martin Luther did it when he stayed with the 95 Theses at the Church of Wittenberg. I mean, that's what we do. We, men and women of God who have grievance against institutions, we go to those institutions. And now I do that same thing in my walk from Baltimore to the White House.
Why are you walking from Baltimore to the White House?
Every month, I go from Carroll Park in Baltimore to the White House.
And you walk?
I walk. Yes, I have several vehicles, and we have a church, but I choose to walk because inspired by God to be a public testimony against the institutional sins of America.
How long does it take you?
It's 42.9 miles that I walk in a day. It, depending upon the weather, it could take me anywhere but from 12 to 18 hours. I've done this walk from Baltimore to the White House 26 times, but I've also walked from Selma to Montgomery, the same route that Dr. King took them 5 days, and that's 54 miles. I did it in 20 hours. About killed me. But I did it in 20 hours, 54 miles. So all in all, together, I've done this walk now 27 times. I call it 40 miles for 40 acres. 40 acres and a mule they promised us. And in fact, going to Charleston next week on the 16th of January, the anniversary date of the signing and issuance of Sherman Field Order number 15 that literally gave newly freed enslaved people the 40 acres that was promised to them. Then the government came and reneged on that promise and took the land back.
You know, it's ironic. I was watching a clip from PBS NewsHour that talked about 40 acres and a lie.
Mm-hmm.
The Center for Public Integrity. They've been
That's
talking
right.
about that. We should, you and I need to do something about that. And I'm going to reach out to them, and I want to connect them to you.
Good.
Because, you know, really, you continue to put really the issue of reparations. And I want us to really talk about that front and center. You're on the National African American Reparations Commission.
That's right.
And some people say, what reparations? Number one, what are they?
Mm-hmm.
And why are they not important but necessary for Black people?
I'm happy you said that, not just important but necessary. Because it reminds me, I liken it to not just charity but justice, right?
What's the difference?
People can do charitable works are things that are optional. You do at your leisure. It makes you feel good. Justice work is a necessity. It's in order to have a just society, you should do justice. And I can say do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before God. So reparations is not, if we are to live in a just society, which I would like to believe, reparations is not an option. Reparations is a necessity. For the oldest and the original sin and crime against humanity that America committed. You know, I hear some people who try to quote the Bible and say, well, you know, you should not punish the son for the sins of the father, which is biblically correct. But we're not talking about what Great Britain did. We're not talking about what France did. Slavery is an American institution. Racism is an American creation. We weren't called by race in Africa or Europe. We were called by where we were from. America invented race. It's a social construct that came on these shores, right? And the first laws that mentioned it were laws against miscegenation in the colonies. And so America must atone. If we are a just nation, if we are a moral nation, I dare say a nation under God, if we are those things, so-called, then reparations is a necessity. And so what it means is it comes from the root word repair. And biblically, it is synonymous with the word atonement. And America has never in her history of all the great things we have done, we rebuilt Europe after the World War. Even today, when countries fall in calamity, we rebuild them. We gave out COVID checks to everybody, right? We gave PPP loans. The majority of them went to white businesses, but we gave out them. We don't mind being benevolent when the folks who are receiving it are white or fair skinned. But when those folk are Black, we have not been as, or if at all, benevolent. And so if America's to be just, if America's to be fair and equitable, reparations is a must.
I see V. Govinder from South Africa sending you so much love, and thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you so much. Because, you know, when you get to South Africa, it feels like home. Because they lived under colonial rule for 400 years. And you see the same racial mixture. I mean, it's the same colonizer, I mean, it's you see it when you go there and you're like, wow, I'm at home. And in Southern Africa, besides, because all of Southern Africa was pulled in by the Dutch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And thank you, V, for being with us today. And I want everyone to like and share the show. Please go. I'm on Blue Sky now at santitajackson.bsky.social and at Santita J on X and Santita Jackson and Friends on the Facebook page and the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please like and share, like and share, like and share. Sending you so much love in a special way. But Robert Williams, Shalom, is saying that part, Rev, because we don't hear people speaking this freely. Reverend Dr. Turner, Reverend Dr. Robert Turner, pastor of the Empowerment Temple in Baltimore, Maryland. Many of us have come to understand the Empowerment Temple through the great Pastor Jamal Bryant. But Empowerment Temple, let me step back from that before I ask you another question. Why is it important to have a church carry that name? Empowerment. Well,
It is a name that is unlike any other church I've ever heard of. If you just put in Google empowerment, you only come up with one church. And it's because we believe in empowering the world with the word. We believe that you should leave here more empowered than when you came. And that is very apropos to the movement and the cause, is that when you are involved in any righteous work, it gives its own energy. As someone who loves to eat good food, I always like to say good meat makes its own gravy. And that's a fact. If you gotta buy gravy, you don't know how to cook meat, because good meat makes its own gravy. And, and the same thing goes when you're doing righteous work, it produces its own energy. That's why, going back to the Bible, when his disciples came up to Jesus, said he must eat, he said, well, I got food that you know not of. When you're doing righteous work, you ought to be empowered by doing it. And so Empowerment Temple is the place where we believe people come and get empowered because they're doing righteous work in the community, in their house, in their world that they live in. And that's what we try to show.
Well, your book, The Culture of Repair, you need to help me to understand that. Because, I've talked to a good many people. You and I both know people from all over the world. And it's wonderful when we speak to our brothers and sisters from the diaspora, because we get a chance to trade stories and experiences. And that's one of the gifts of the AME Church, because you have such a strong presence on the continent and really throughout the world, which is a real gift for us. Help me to understand this culture. Vivek Ramaswamy was talking about the problem of American culture. He said, no, you don't have an intelligence problem, you have a culture problem. And when you look in the Black American community, those of us, particularly those of us whose foreparents were enslaved here. And I'm not downing anyone else. Look, my mother's father came from the Caribbean, but he went back to the Caribbean because he thought that American racism was so abhorrent that he left. He said, this place is a horrible place. And I'm not going to stay. And that was one of the last things he said to my mother. She never saw him again.
Wow. And
repair means before you need repair, you've something in you, in your circumstance has been hurt, has been damaged, maybe even destroyed. What do you mean? What is this culture that you're talking about?
It is a culture. Everything we found in our life, that everything literally rises and falls on culture. Laws can change and modify and regulate behavior, but laws do not make people do whatever. The culture does. We had emancipation, but the culture in America was still that of white superiority and the thought of black inferiority.
Mm-hmm.
So after emancipation, we still had sharecropping. We still had, as Michelle Alexander brilliantly states, slavery by another name, the new Jim Crow, right? Um, it evolved. Your dad mentioned it never went away. It just evolved because the culture hadn't changed.
Mm-hmm.
Integration came, but because the culture hadn't changed, you had the creation of these white parochial schools, these academies that developed. And so one of the things that I want to happen is all the laws to change. Definitely, the laws must change. The laws need to change. The laws for the benefit of America needs to change. But in addition to that, we need to make sure that the culture changes as well. And that is the purpose of this book, to help change the culture that we live in this nation, to be not just one that produces laws of repair, but a culture of repair. Because the laws can be modified.
Mm-hmm.
The laws we saw recently with the Voting Rights Act of 1965, they just recently took away the pre-clearance clause a few years back. Laws can be changed, but culture is more mainstay. But culture is also the hardest part to address.
Do you think what would a culture of repair in the United States in particular look like?
You
Because
gotta
we
get the book.
yeah, well, oh, give us a help
Yeah.
us to see
So
what we're
in the
going to be
book,
looking at.
thank you for asking. This it's the longest. First of all, it's the longest list of reparatory ideas in the world. And it goes by the traditional definition of reparations, right? I use the United Nations definition of it, the 5 pillars within it, and but I also break it down into 4 categories, um, to make it a lot more relevant and easy to apply to people's lives, right? So the first is individual reparations. This form is designed for people who are just, quite frankly, tired of waiting on their government to do something. So they do something on their own. They start initiatives that create this culture of repair, and it goes directly. It could be done by blacks, but it targets whites in a major way. One of the examples, one of the 100 examples in the book that I mentioned, is how white people can research their own history, and they can find if their families were involved in the slave trade or in the ownership of enslaved people, and they can reach out to those individuals.
Let me
To
stop you there. Why is that important? Because you hear over and over again from white people, I didn't enslave anybody. And now I didn't participate in segregation. I didn't participate in Jim Crow. I mean, and the further we get from it, the more you hear it, and their calls are louder. They're like, look, enough. That's behind us. That was even in the um in the voting rights decision, that when the Supreme Court Justice Roberts said, look, when he wrote about eliminating preclearance, he said, look, we've had a black president. We don't need this anymore.
Yep.
This is a different America. So talk to me. Help me to understand, when you're talking to white people, particularly as they get younger and younger and younger. What's
No,
the
that's important, because what white people have to understand is that reparations is not just for black people. It may directly benefit black people, but it's about healing the soul of America.
Mm.
And we have to get out of this zero-sum game. If I don't benefit from it, then we shouldn't do it. No, do you continue to want to pass this thing down to your family? You know, well, if you do the research, you will know how your family got their wealth. Are you going to be a part of that generation that turns a blind eye to what the misdeeds of your family are? Or are you going to be a part of the generation that seeks to redeem your family's name? And that question, by extension, goes to the second category. The first is individual repair. The second is societal repair. Like, are we going to be a part of the generation that turns a blind eye as a society to what we did and what we do still to a group of people solely because of the color of their skin? And the next form is institutional repair. What can we, how institutional? To me, this is the truest form. This is in the third chapter. The truest form of repair is this institutional, and it speaks to what the government should do and what governmental institutions should do for bringing about reparations. And I say government institutions because that includes our public schools, that includes our colleges, universities, that includes any governmentally funded entity in this nation. And the last chapter speaks to spiritual reparations that involves the misdeeds of the church, to be quite honest, and how that should be atoned for in this country.
We're speaking with Reverend Dr. Robert Turner of the Empowerment Temple in Baltimore, Maryland. Indeed, he's from the National African American Reparations Commission. And you've got to get his book, The Culture of Repair, because we need that. Because there is like, you remember, or you might not remember, Jimmy Carter took a lot of hits. President Carter, who is, we're now in the midst of his homegoing celebrations. He talked about this spiritual malaise that it settled over America. And this was, of course, in the wake of really the painful resignation and moment and trauma of Watergate. Because that was traumatic. That was traumatizing for everybody, quite frankly. You didn't have to be a Republican to be traumatized. It was watching a president brought low, watching Bill Clinton brought low. It impacts every American because whether we want to acknowledge it or not, we are a family. And so when you talk about this culture, changing the culture, that is the hard part. But you're saying that's the necessary part.
Yes.
What are the consequences of the culture not changing?
If our culture doesn't change, we will continue down this road of moral decay. And if America's okay with that, I'm not, then she will definitely continue to reap what she sows. It's the same thing that happens if you choose not to take your medicine. The sickness will turn into death. And to answer your other question, the reason why it's so important for the faith community to speak out on this is because we ought to be the ones, as Jesus said about Lazarus, this sickness is not unto death. We ought to be the ones that can say about racism, this sickness is not unto death. But America, you got to take your medicine. And reparations is the medicine, the cure. Everything else has been painkillers to numb the pain. Everything else has been painkillers we've been talking about. And it hasn't been working that much to numb the pain. Affirmative action, painkillers, right? And we still not the largest beneficiary of that is white women. Most of the programs we have, social programs we have, and I'm thankful for them because at least there's something, but all they are painkillers. It's not medicine to cure the illness. The illness is racism, white supremacy, the idolatry of white supremacy. If you want to speak spiritually. And so if America does not take her medicine and stop getting high off painkillers, she's going to eventually die.
Well, is this the death? Because Dr. King felt that we were approaching spiritual death if we did not turn away from militarism and racism and materialism. Is this what you're speaking to?
Yes, this thought that if you don't look like me, if you don't come from where I come from, you must be the enemy, you must be the problem. Allows for people who look like you and who have been the problem. Like the biggest terrorist in America has not been black people.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't bomb Oklahoma City bombings. We didn't bomb Black Wall Street in Tulsa. The biggest terrorists in America, we don't go into churches and shoot them up like they did in Mother Emanuel in Charleston. The biggest terrorists have been white folks. But America is so fixated on seeing black people as the problem, particularly black men as a problem. They missing the wolf in sheep clothing that is among themselves. They're so busy eyeing us. And we've only tried to help this nation. And so even right now, if you look at the Department of Justice, the biggest terrorist threat in America is white supremacist organizations that's propping up all around this nation. We saw what happened on January the 6th, the insurrection. That wasn't a black-led march or protest. Those are white people that stormed the nation. They did what Russia couldn't even do. They stormed the United States Capitol. They did what Hitler couldn't even do. They did what Robert E. Lee couldn't even do. Trump supporters stormed the Capitol. You know how Iran couldn't even do that. Saddam Hussein couldn't do that. China hadn't even done that. It's within. So if America can't solve and can't get her head around the fact that black folk, we're not your enemy. The real enemy who looks like them is going to take them out.
Why is it so persistent that we're the enemy? We've been othered and not brothered.
Because America has allowed, and when I say America, I mean white America has allowed, and as Keller mentioned, the misappropriation of God's grace. They really feel that white means right, and right is righteousness. And so it's hard for them to see themselves as the problem in large part. Now, I gotta admit, in my life and in my sojourn, I've met some very good-hearted and well-meaning white people. I do not demean the entire race at all. And the word race is a social construct. So I don't demean the entire hue of people, melanin deficient people, that now we call white. But America as a whole, white America, has a problem seeing themselves as the problem, and easier to see others, to see us as others, even though we've only tried to present ourselves as brothers. There's not been a people in this nation, and I say this without any fear of contradiction, there has not been a people in this nation that has gotten as less as we have and done more for this nation. There's not been one. For every generation, we've been patriots and patriotic, in spite getting the leftovers, if we got anything at all.
Mm-hmm. And everything that we've given the world,
yes,
America is celebrated for our gifts to the world.
We are American culture. We were rock and roll. We created Western music, cowboy music. We were the original cowboys.
Yeah.
Country music, soul food, a good old American cooking. That's us. R&B, blues, rock and roll, all that. Of course, rap. We did that. And we get that's the culture. We're not even talking about the medicines of George Washington Carver or Charles Drew or the DNA of Henrietta Lacks. We're not even talking about the and the terrible operations they did for gynecological research on Black women, sick doctors who created science using Black bodies. Like I'm from the Tuskegee syphilis study. We're not even talking about that. And the wealth they got literally off our backs, right? America would be a terrible place if we're not for the benefits they got from black folks.
So, I mean, so how do we move the needle on this? I mean, because everyone is so, not everyone, a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people have a lot of trepidation and fear as we move into the Trump era.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, Pastor, I have maintained that this is my cousin put it this way, bless his heart, brilliant engineer, got his PhD at Stanford. And he was the only, when we went to the graduation, he was the only black person in that whole program. And that was interesting. And he said, you know what? What we need to wrap our minds around is that America, I think, is having an honest moment. You know, we kept hearing President Biden say, this is not who we are. And I said, but yeah, it is.
Yep.
This is who we are. Now, how do we get from who we are to where we ought to be? And I think it is having a culture, changing the culture and moving into repair. So, I mean, in these last 5 minutes or so, I need you to help us to understand, you know, why we should not be fearful in this moment, because a lot of people are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I my next walk is going to be on January the 20th, Dr. King's Day, and the day that President Trump has chosen for his inauguration. And I have people that really care about my safety, right, in my life, who've advised against it. And I understand that. I understand for a lot of reasons, right? The fear and trepidation that you just mentioned is real. But my mother, and I love her to death, love her to life. When I first started doing activism work, she was very concerned about my life. Being in Alabama, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm not new to this. I'm trying to be true to this. And I had to tell her at a young age, at like 18, when I was an activist at the University of Alabama, when we found they had racism still going on there. I said, Mom, I'm in the hands of the Lord. And whatever God allows me to go through doing his work, I go through. Now, I got things personally that I'm not always how I should be. Now, that's what I'm worried about. But when I'm doing God's work, I'm not worried about what may happen to me. So I told my mother that, and she still has her concerns.
Yeah.
But I'm in God's hands when I'm doing God's work. And what we have to do, in spite of the fear, fighting without fearing within, we must rely upon the one who told us to do the work. And now, if we're taking our orders from man, then you ought to be concerned. But this, to me, is a divine movement. And honestly, sister, we've seen worse. We've seen much worse. I mean, this country, we've had 16 presidents preside over slavery, right? We saw what happened with George Wallace. We've seen much worse in this as black people in this nation. Trump is terrible, but Trump ain't even he's not the worst we've seen as a nation.
No, he's not.
And so if our forefathers and foremothers can deal with folks like George Wallace, can deal with people who had no incentive to help or work with us and wanted to kill us, right? We can deal with 16 presidents who presided over slavery, right? And they still protest. They still fought back Harriet Tubman in Maryland. They still fought back Frederick Douglass from Maryland. And in doing the civil rights, they still fought back Thurgood Marshall from Baltimore, Maryland. You know, so we have a history of people that are not afraid. So why should we be?
And they keep going forward. I mean, and you got a Capitol. More than half of the monuments, the statues are of Confederate so-called heroes. These are traitors to the nation.
Traitors.
Reverend Dr. Roberts. They're traitors.
And they got reparations too.
They got reparations too.
Yep.
And so, you know, in these last couple of minutes, please make the case for reparations, because some people push back on reparations.
We thank you for that question. We have to make reparations. First of all, it's not just a black issue. It may benefit directly black people, which it should, but it's really to redeem and to heal the soul of America. I can't say that enough. That's issue. That's number one. If you love America, you ought to want America to have reparations be done for the folk America hurt the first. First. Secondly, for black people, we cannot and we should stop allowing other people to set our agendas for us. We should stop allowing other people who may be part of political parties that we support to set our agenda for us. We need to tell the political players that be elected officials, your congressman, your mayor, your governor, whomever. Reparations is not just an issue, it's the issue. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We cannot expect for anybody to take our issues more seriously than we do. Even though it's going to still benefit them, we can't expect them to take it as serious as we do if we don't take it serious. So in every conversation, whenever any elected official, can they come here to Empowerment Temple a whole lot, when they come here, they know Dr. Turner is going to talk to them about reparations. We got potholes on the street. I'm not going. That's another issue. We got abandoned houses. That's an issue. But the issue I'm going to talk to you about is reparations for our people, and we have to be that in unison across the nation. One thing about black folks is we are so sweet and benevolent. We talk about every issue in the world. And when you talk about so many issues, you ain't talking about any issue. We have to be singularly focused on the oldest crime that has impacted our people. If you love everybody say they love their mama on Mother's Day. They love their grandmama. They love their great-grandmama. If you really love them, fight for them to get justice.
Without apology.
Without apology. My Jewish friends do not apologize for advocating for Israel. They don't. My Spanish-speaking friends do not apologize for asking for immigration reform. They don't. Why are we still apologizing and whispering the word reparations?
Why? Why are we?
My friends in the LGBTQI community, they don't apologize for asking for their rights. They don't apologize. Women, feminists, don't apologize for asking for their rights. They shout it from the rooftops. But black people, they're not going to give it to us.
Oh my God.
And nobody has a higher moral ground to ask for what they want than black folks. None of those other groups have a higher moral ground than black folks to ask for what, did not ask, but to demand for what they want. But they shout it from the rooftops and we whispering in back closets. Make it make sense.
Help me before we go. I mean, why are we apologizing? Whispering in the corners, and we'll beat you up.
I get it all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, this whole intersectionality. Why don't you talk about other things? For what? Black folks have been left at the intersection while everybody else got the green light. We're told to stay right there. Everybody else has had their turn. Intersectionality. That's helped everybody else out at the intersection. We still waiting to get our turn.
And we getting hit by cars.
and we getting hit by cars at the same time. Intersectionality. Okay. We still at the intersection. We got there first. We in the turning lane. We let everybody else turn. And we still there. And we getting hit. And we got our people blowing the horns at us. Trying to make it plain. Paint the picture, preacher.
Look, make it plain, preacher. Make it plain. Creating the culture of repair. You've got to create it.
Yes.
Oh, what did my father say? Nobody will save us for us but us. And we are somebody. And when you believe you are somebody, Pastor, you will fight for yourself. I want you to have the final word. People need a word that's going to lift them up today. And no one is better at it than you, the pastor of the Empowerment Temple, Reverend Dr. Robert Turner.
one of the great things about being here in Baltimore is there's a group that's called We Are Us, and they have a slogan trying to reduce crime. It was actually a group that also helped very much so, supported by the mayor of the city, Brandon Scott. And the slogan is, we all we got and we all we need. And I would like to extend that to us as a people. I mean, it's a predominantly Black men. And we, in this history of this nation, we all we got. But the blessed part about that is we all we need. If the Bible says, if my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face, then shall they hear from heaven. We are God's people. No doubt about it. Read Deuteronomy. If everything we have experienced is happening to anybody else, they would have been annihilated. We have been protected and preserved by God. We are all, and we have seen that we are all, we have seen that we all we got. But thankfully, we also all we need. Everything we need, we got already. We need the funds, we got it. We need numbers, we got it. We need the talent, we got it. But what we need to show is the will. So I implore you to show the will. I thank you, my dear sister, for having me on your show. Keep me in your prayers. I know you are a praying woman. This walk on the 20th will not be easy. This commemoration on the 16th will not be easy. But I would definitely appreciate your prayers as we seek to take the mantle to carry it forward. We've gone through emancipation. We've gone through integration. Now it's time for reparations. And I'm thankful to be in this generation to help try to bring that about.
The Anointed, Reverend Dr. Robert Turner. Get the book, Creating the Culture of Repair. We need that. Repair. Right there, right there, right there. Hold it up again so people can see it. Creating a Culture of Repair. We've got to change the culture, everybody. Not just the laws, the culture. When you change the culture, there's some things that morally you are prohibited from doing because it's just wrong. The culture changes the laws, not the reverse. Think about that. Creating a Culture of Repair by the Anointed Reverend Dr. Robert Turner. When you are in Baltimore or when you're not in Baltimore, can we check you out online?
Absolutely. You can check us out online. We have our YouTube channel, have our, of course, Facebook page. We have our church website, etame.net. And you can follow along the walk too on my personal social media at Rev Dr. Robert Turner on Instagram.
Okay, we're going to do that. And you know, I am totally with you, and I'm going to see you in a couple weeks. I cannot wait. Thank you for blessing us today. You did that. And it's one of the great blessings of my life to have another brother. And I have that in you with your beautiful family. Sending you so much love.
Thank you.
God bless you. Santita Jackson Show, everybody. AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.